Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is episode 400 of CryptoBiography. And I was tempted to do some sort of special 400 episode thing, but I decided to just write. I figured, at the end of the year, I had already done a sort of look back on the year, and that felt like enough as far as looking back, sort of goes. I don't really need to do it again here, less than 2 full months later. So anyway, we've got the first part of a new story, and it's called Sleepflying. And here we go. It happened one Sunday morning. Melissa started to wake up. Normally, this was a problem. She was over 50 now and typically had trouble sleeping. It was mostly just aches and pains. She'd acquired some joint issues over her life. But this morning, she felt great. Not an ache or pain anywhere. She stayed there on the edge of waking up, keeping her eyes closed and enjoying the sensation of not hurting anywhere. She did notice, however, that she was a little cold and not where she expected to be. She thrashed when she slept, and she would often find that in the night the sheets had come loose and her feet stuck out and got very chilly. But in this case, it wasn't her feet. It was everything below her. Everything touching the bed was cold. Was the bed wet? How else could her bed be cold? She reluctantly opened her eyes. She was facing up, but she couldn't see anything. The sun had risen outside and the ceiling was gray, but she couldn't focus on it. She squinted and tried again. The ceiling remained gray, and still she couldn't focus on it. Couldn't see the little ridges and textures. She moved her head and saw that she was above the top of the window. She couldn't see the ceiling because she's only a hand's breadth away from it. She was floating above her bed. Her sheets were over her body, but there was nothing but air below her, thus the cold. She gasped and fully woke up. And with that, the flight was over. She free fell from the ceiling, fortunately, directly onto her bed, and the force still knocked the air out of her. She lay there, gasping, terrified. She waited until her breathing had slowed to nearly normal. To be fair, she was also wondering if she would be rising back toward the ceiling if she moved. But she had to move. She didn't have to grasp the sheets, she already was. Instead, she moved a leg. She didn't fly off the bed, or even seem to change her buoyancy one bit. She moved some more. Her personal gravity remained. Finally, she scooched over to the side of the bed and swung her legs over. They were, she noticed, starting to ache. She touched the floor, and then carefully stood up, still a bit hunched over and holding the bedsheets. Nothing. She let them go and stood up fully. She wasn't floating. She took some time, but eventually even opened her bedroom door and went out into the rest of her apartment. Slowly, through the day, she realized she was not going to suddenly go off spinning into the ceiling. Still, she did not dare leave her apartment, even though she rather needed groceries. That night, she got out every pillow, cushion, and big soft object that she could find and spread them around, while at the same time moving her bedside table and her other non-bed furniture out into the hall. She did not want to float in her sleep, wake up, and fall hard onto a chunk of wood or metal. She didn't have to worry about her head or footboards because she didn't have either on her bed. So the floor was covered with as much softness as possible, and she went to sleep, almost grudgingly, after many hours, and certainly well after she normally shut her eyes. She woke up again on the ceiling. This time she actually felt the ceiling through her bedsheet on her knee, and the air below her was cold again. She tried not to fully wake up, but her mind knew that she was not in her bed. She opened her eyes and immediately fell. This time, she only mostly fell onto the bed, but her arm swung out and back in an awkward way, and she felt a pain in her shoulder. She cried and went into a fetal position. Her shoulder fortunately did not seem to be injured in any serious way. The sharp pain soon gave way to a dull throb and then to almost nothing. It didn't take her as long to get out of bed. She went to her computer and tried to find a way to keep her in her bed. She knew she wouldn't be able to sleep well if she just tied herself down. She thrashed in her sleep. Finally, she found a possible solution: a bed tent. It was as the name implied, a tent that just goes on your bed with the mattress inside. And the ends and so on could be zipped up, or not. And there were vents, and the fabric was thin so that it would let oxygen get through. It was meant for blocking light, mostly. But she figured if she bumped against it, it would be soft, and also, if touching the apex of the tent woke her up, she would only fall a couple of feet. That could work, she thought. She was exhausted and called in sick to work. She ordered the bed tent, which fortunately would come in 2 days. And then she waited. And that's the end of part 1. I hope you're enjoying it, having fun with it. Haven't done anything in the Connections continuity for some time, and it's nice to get back to it. If you don't know about the Connections continuity, it started early in the fiction part of this CryptoBiography, and started with a story called Connections, and it's sort of set in modern time, but with like these sort of weird, not quite superhero abilities, but like, vaguely sort of supernatural or superheroic abilities that just sort of often don't work right, or awkwardly handled, or just exist in this sort of way that actually isn't all that helpful all the time. Sometimes it is, but often it isn't. And there you go. So this is part of that continuity set in sort of modern day, usually in the United States, I figure. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook, or Blue Sky, or Mastodon. And we no longer are on Twitter X. Thank you for listening. Characters and event, music, words and music, copyright 2025, Brandon Starr, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.